welcome to the A2Pcast for the week of September 4th, 2013, the Future Franchise Edition. This is going to be a two-parter A2Pcast. So we're going to have the first part this week, obviously, and then the second part of it next week. So you'll get it in two chunks, but we're recording it all at the same time. With me today is Josh Hartman and Mike Shupsky, our two writers. I am Mike Reifenberry, the editor of Alive to Play. The topics for the this week and the next week are the future of the Mass Effect franchise, the Nintendo 2DS, aka the Wedge of Cheese, the future of the Fallout franchise, and the future of the Halo franchise. You might have also noticed we have a jingle this week. We'll be keeping that. That is written by our very own Josh Hartman, and I think it sounds fantastic. Let's jump into Mass Effect. Where do we think Mass Effect is going to go? We've had, obviously, the trilogy, which is sort of swung from more RPG, something a little more, like a sleek version of KOTOR, and then in Mass Effect 2, they swung the pendulum in the other direction to something that was almost like a Gears of War third-person shooter with very minimal RPG stuff. And then in Mass Effect 3, we had I thought, a pretty nice balance between action RPG stuff and character customization, assigning points to skills, weapon customization, things like that, as well as all of the choice element that's been involved in Mass Effect from the beginning. So where do we see it going as a franchise? Josh, what do you think?
I would suspect that they're not going to backtrack into the Mass Effect 2 world, just because I think there was a lot of backlash from hardcore Mass Effect fans about how it became...
And just average RPG fans.
Just anyone who likes RPGs, and all of a sudden Mass Effect 2 was so much less of an RPG, and the way 3 kind of mashed those things up together. Very similar to Dragon Age, actually. Now that we're seeing all this stuff from Inquisition. The same story. Right. 2 comes along and isn't very good, and then the third one they kind of bring it together back to its roots a little bit. So I don't suspect that it will head back. At least I hope not. That would be, that'd be dumb, because that just means they didn't pay attention. So I think we can expect to see more of 3. I don't think we'll ever go back the other direction though either. I don't think we'll see it become more RPG-like.
Like a super RPG, a lot of statistics.
Yeah, no. I think 3 is probably about as statistic heavy and planned out and skill heavy as Mass Effect will ever be henceforth.
Well, let's just play along with some hypotheticals here. What would a really stat heavy Mass Effect game look like? Would it, is Mass Effect 1 the sort of perfect example of that, or is there, of course it can always get more intense, but how would that manifest itself, Mike?
See, this is a good question, because I really think we saw the extent of the stat-heavy RPG that we're going to be seeing in Mass Effect with Mass Effect 3. I think going forward, we're not going to be seeing anything that made even something like KOTOR as stat-heavy or as number-intensive as Mass Effect 1, as KOTOR was. I just think that this is the trend of the industry in general. Like we're moving away from being grounded into the nitpicky, stat-heavy leveling up and maxing out the stats that we were worried about, say, like 10 years ago. And now we're just worried about the story, the immersion of the world, just having fun with the gameplay in general. So,
and almost, I think that kind of plays into a lot of what we've seen in like some of the Elder Scrolls games, and even in Mass Effect, is that you no longer in so many games do you sort of pick your path at the beginning and you're kind of locked into that character's skill set or something like that. You kind of play as you go, and you never feel penalized for maybe picking the wrong thing at the beginning of the game. You kind of just go with it.
To play off the Elder Scrolls, the biggest feature that they tried to tout in Skyrim was if you were playing as a magic character from the beginning of the game, and then you just decide halfway through you want to be really good at sword fighting, you just start swinging a sword and you get better at swinging a sword. Like 10 years ago, you couldn't do that in a traditional RPG because
it was 5 or 7 years ago in Oblivion. You couldn't really.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah, because they had those bonuses. When you picked your major skills would advance faster than every other skill. So
Right.
there was never you could never escape the choices from the beginning.
Yeah, right.
And if you sunk all your XP into those secondary things, you were screwed like halfway through the game. You just couldn't advance because your character wasn't powerful enough. In many cases,
It's true, and I think in order to level up, unless I'm confusing with Morrowind, in order to level up, you have to use your major or Morrowind skills.
Right.
Other skills will not count for it.
They don't count toward leveling up. But let's keep it on Mass Effect here. So I mean, but just I think we haven't really explored the hypothetical of what like a really stat-heavy Mass Effect game would be like. Is the immersion that you find in a Mass Effect game almost antithetical to like to something that's all about the game element, the numbers?
I don't know if it always needs to be antithetical to that, but because of the way Mass Effect, from the ground up, was always an action RPG, and to try and take away the actual gunplay from it would be really tricky. And I think in doing so, it would make it not Mass Effect. If it had happened, I mean, the only thing I can think is if the first thing you do to kind of facilitate that is to take away the combat, like Knights of the Old Republic did. And then I can kind of envision how that game might function like a prettier version of Knights of the Old Republic, but I don't think that would ever be a good idea, because I think by that point, then, we're not playing Mass Effect anymore.
That's true.
Yeah. I think if I could make one guess as to the combat perspective of Mass Effect 4, or whatever it's going to be called, I think the multiplayer aspect of Mass Effect 3 can give us a good indication of where the combat is going in the future. I think not having the combat wheel is something that they might explore in later games. Just having 3 powers and like never breaking the action.
That are constantly button mapped.
Yeah,
you're not pausing the game.
Always button mapped. You're never pausing the game. I think that could be something they move towards. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is very much up for debate. But I think that has a good chance.
I think the successes of Mass Effect 3's multiplayer kind of speaks to whether or not that's a good thing. I mean, I was really skeptical at first. Like, I didn't buy Mass Effect 3 because I thought the multiplayer looked good. I bought it because I wanted to finish the Shepard story.
And now how many?
And now I haven't played through the single player campaign again, but I mean, how many hours have we sunk into the multiplayer together? It's
a lot.
It's enormous, because it really turned out great. And of course, it helps a lot that they've been supporting it so much as well.
But this goes back to the debate of the jump from Mass Effect 1 to 2. It was stripped down so much. I think this will be another potential debate if they do indeed go with just the 3 button map as opposed to the combat radial dial that you can pause the game at any time with. Me personally, I really liked Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2 is probably my favorite of the series. And a big reason for that was the simplification of the combat. I found Mass Effect 1's combat to be kind of clunky at times.
Oh, well, it was.
And
the biotics were sort of worthless as well. I think everyone kind of agrees on that.
Yeah, but I mean, say what you will about dumbing down the gameplay, streamlining it. I really liked the Gears of War feel to it, and I feel it had enough RPG elements where it didn't just feel like a run-of-the-mill third-person shooter where you were running and gunning as you please. You still had some tactical abilities. So I think as long as they keep that in mind, if they continue to streamline it, which I think they will, I'll go with it. I'll roll with it. I'll be okay with it.
So let's swing to the other end of the spectrum here, and let's explore what if it were to be a first-person shooter game, because BioWare had experimented with that. There are videos of some sort of like alpha version of a first-person shooter multiplayer sort of thing. Would that be a Mass Effect game, like as we know it, or would it just be a separate game that happened to be set in the Mass Effect universe?
Well, to use an analogy, 2 analogies to see, it could go in 2 different directions. I mean, it could feel a bit like the Star Wars Republic Commando, or it could feel more like Far Cry or Skyrim. Again, coming back to the Elder Scrolls being the hotshot first-person RPG of the world. So, in terms of that, like if you were to think, if you took Skyrim's gameplay and or Fallout's gameplay, because it already has guns, if you took like Fallout gameplay and put it in space, there's feasibility, I think, for a game there. Again, would it be Mass Effect? I don't think it would ever be appropriate for a main game in the series, but since they've concluded their trilogy, they could make any number of games within the confines of that universe. And I think that might be a worthy exploration.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, the trilogy's over. But they have so much potential for this world, though. I mean, they could literally do anything. I feel like
the codex in there are just ridiculous,
massive. It's just such an open world, not just for gameplay, but just for story and for everything. That I think the sandbox is open and they can just do whatever they want with it.
So what does it mean to have, as so many EA games now are, the game being produced in the Frostbite 3 engine? Will we see like destructible worlds from it? Are they not going to use that side of it? Do they just want it because, it's another bullet point to say, oh, look, another game is using Frostbite 3. I mean, Plants vs. Zombies is using Frostbite 3, for fuck's sake. So, is it going to matter, or
I'm not sure. I don't know how much. I think it's good.
Obviously,
Frostbite 3 is a good engine to use. I don't think that we can really predict how BioWare is going to use it, because up until this point, Mass Effect has run on Unreal. Mass Effect was the first BioWare game, I think, to run on the Unreal Engine. Before that, they had their own in-house engine that they use the updated version of for the Dragon Age Origins. Was the Knights of the Old Republic engine that had been updated. They're all named something like Jupiter and Twilight, and
strange
Celestial
names.
something.
Names, yeah.
Strange names, but it always struck me, even though the first one is less so, that the BioWare using Unreal, aside from the texture popping in the first one, I don't think really feels like the Unreal Engine. There's tons of games out there that use the Unreal Engine, and you play, you're like, well, guess who used the Unreal Engine?
Oh, right. But
whereas BioWare, they always made it their own.
Right. If you have a studio that's full of enough really competent people that aren't just doing it because they don't actually know how to write, their own shaders, their own lighting stuff. If you're a studio like that doesn't understand any of that can't, or maybe just doesn't have the talent in house, or doesn't have the money to spend on that, then it kind of shows. You go, oh, this looks like an Unreal game. This looks like a Gears of War clone or something like that. It looks like Bulletstorm, or because it just has the sheen to it.
Yeah,
the Unreal sheen. But it's even like BioShock. All the BioShock games have been in the Unreal Engine,
right?
But they don't look like it at all.
No, I didn't even know that.
Exactly, exactly, right. They've all been produced in the Unreal Engine, albeit obviously a heavily modified version of it. So, taking the Frostbite 3 engine, and I mean, I don't think we can even imagine what sort of, the lighting effects in the current Mass Effect series are beautiful. Can we just imagine what that's going to look like in Frostbite? Frostbite does lighting stuff very, very well.
Yeah.
I just can't even imagine it's going to look beautiful.
They've stated multiple times how excited they are to show us new Dragon Age 3 stuff. It's just...
Well, we've just recently seen some new Dragon Age 3
Speaking
stuff.
of which, we've just seen stuff, but they've been stating repeatedly, even before then, wait till you see what we've come up with
it looks
in this engine.
Leaps and bounds.
Yeah, I was shocked. I still hadn't been on the Dragon Age Inquisition train until this morning, when I saw more footage of something, and I read an article about the new...
People look like people.
The new things. They still look like Dragon Age people. The art style has been preserved, but the high frame rate and the magic effects are just wonderful looking, and the fact that that it's going back to again, rather than being an action-packed button masher like 2 was, actually going back to an open world RPG style game is also enticing, but if that's that BioWare Edmonton doing that, I mean, what is Mass Effect 4, Mass Effect Continued going to even look like?
Do we know? I'm. This is probably something I should have looked up before we started recording. But is Casey Hudson leading the Mass Effect 4 team? I thought I read something about that. Either confirming or denying, but I can't remember which it was.
I seem to think that he's overseeing it, but I know that he's also working on a brand new IP.
Is he?
In BioWare's development team. So I'm sure he's involved in some capacity with the next Mass Effect. But he's also stated that he's very heavily involved in a brand new franchise that BioWare is currently developing. When we'll see that, I don't know. But
that's really exciting. BioWare is just I think it's one of the great companies alive, as if companies could live. But
hey, Mitt Romney.
Hey, Mitt Romney. They so very rarely, if ever, make a bad game.
Yeah.
And they don't actually have that many IPs. And that's really exciting.
But it's similar to Bethesda. They sort of have a small number of really good things.
Yeah.
Yeah, which has always worked out well. It kind of brings back the thoughts of loving Knights of the Old Republic so much, and then seeing that new trailer for Mass Effect and not even knowing what Mass Effect was. I was like, oh my god.
Right.
There's a whole new world, and it's all BioWare. This is gonna be great. And I remember playing. I never played all the way through Jade Empire, but I really liked what I did play of Jade Empire as their first foray into action RPGs, and that I think there's still stuff that they could do with that. I think it was a cool enough game that it would be worthy of a sequel.
They could, with the Dragon Age 3 stuff, they keep going back to, or comparing it to Baldur's Gate 2, and Skyrim especially, with getting back to the open world idea. Like, they're very into the idea now of creating a world that you can openly traverse and walk around. And this is something that, like, I've thought about with, like, the Mass Effect series. It's an RPG, but we talked about this, like, a little while ago, but, like, it's an RPG, but it's not necessarily an open world RPG. You could argue that Mass Effect 1 was an open world RPG, where you could fly to any of the planets and land on them.
Well, but it's still semi-open world. It's not a continuous thing because of, space.
If what I'm hearing,
you can't just hop in a plane and take off.
Right,
there are cutscenes that come in between.
There are only guided locations that you can be. But I will say, always in defense of the Mako, as bad as the gameplay with the Mako was,
I loved it.
Taking it away felt like I'd been robbed, even if it wasn't a great experience to drive around on an alien planet.
It's better than the pros.
Having the ability to just do it.
Right.
Even if I just wanted to go down there and jack off, just to have my own little story going on in my head. I had that freedom, even if I never exercised.
You could go, you could explore, you could find the minerals, you would sometimes stumble upon random stuff, and like all the collection stuff of the game was done on those on those little
attacked by Thresher Moss,
the Thresher Moss stuff, which was always terrifying. I personally really liked it. The Mako mechanics could have been a lot better, obviously, but as a concept, I think it still had legs, and they kind of cut the legs off of the Mako.
And if what I'm hearing correctly from Dragon Age 3 is going to come to fruition.
Is there going to be a Mako in Dragon Age 3?
There's going to be a Mako. Indeed, a Mako in Dragon Age 3.
You heard it here first.
Yes. Alive to play exclusive.
We got the scoop. But I think they're leaning more towards that idea of free roam and having a lot more area to traverse.
But I think everyone is. I mean, the new Metal Gear Solid is open world.
Yeah.
There are so many games that you wouldn't naturally associate with being open world that are now transitioning to open world. Because, honestly, that kind of seems like the future of gaming is like...
Well, yeah.
We have Grand Theft Auto 5 coming out in a couple weeks, and, it's sort of poised to be like the game that kind of changes everything. It seems like it's really going to be that groundbreaking, and to have that much land to explore and to have it all full of you can do everything. You can play Grand Theft Auto 5 as like a golfing simulator. You can play tennis and just play tennis. You can go scuba diving and just not even do any of the things that you would commonly associate with
Well,
Grand
you
Theft
really
Auto.
want to just go on a bedlam rampage when you can instead go scuba diving.
Right. It's like, and sometimes, you know what? Maybe scuba diving's going to be more fun. Maybe you don't feel like running over pedestrians today.
Yeah.
Maybe you feel like taking a
And
scuba dive.
as I have mentioned in previous podcasts, I think just even I just mentioned it with the Mako, the mere existence of choice
Doesn't
enhances
lie. Yeah.
everything else you do, because that makes the choice that you make worthwhile, because you could have done anything else.
Right.
I'm going to golf right now, and it feels even more special to my personal experience because no one told me I had to.
Right. You could be doing 20 other things, but you chose to do golf.
Yeah, and it helps you become more immersed and you become more invested in it because it is yours to own.
So, Mass Effect 4, what are we getting? We want Mako, we want golf. Space golf.
We want space golf, Makos, and an open world mountain range.
Yeah, there we go. But really, I think an open world Mass Effect game would be, a hell of an undertaking. But can we just imagine what sort of like
real freedom on which planet to go to?
Yeah, I'm just like
galaxy at your fingertips. That's
that's a
ridiculous, but it's also really
of stuff to do. But wow, that's
well, given the general trend.
I don't see that. I don't see that as being super unrealistic.
Totally crazy.
It doesn't seem like something. Well, but think about this.
It depends on
BioWare did create the Old Republic, which is an MMO. But even if you rip out the MMO mechanics of that, you do just have, how many planets to explore? I don't even know. A ton. Like a ton of them. And the development cycle on that was obviously a long time. And I think they've hinted at a release window for the next Mass Effect for 2014, 2015. That doesn't seem like they're going to do something in that direction. But I don't think it's out of the realm
just
of
a flavor of it.
Right.
Little by little would be great, because the next generation of stuff, as has been said before, graphical capabilities are slowing down in how much more is each system going to be more powerful in terms of making things look better. How much better can we make things look? There's always room for improvement. And sure, we can always keep chasing after photoreality, but that is not the focus of what really makes a next-gen game a next-gen game. Now, the 360 transition, everything was about how it looked. That was literally the singular focus of the world. How does it look?
Right.
How pretty is it? Everything is pretty. But the ability to create large worlds, the processing power not to drive visuals, but to drive physics and artificial intelligence.
Well,
and
really,
also
draw distances, not having to load, as many maps in between things. The transition is better. You can have a level of detail that scales out and doesn't sort of get chunky. Just thinking about like Oblivion. When you had to load different areas, whenever you switch to a different cell, it does this loading thing, and you kind of like stand still for a minute. It's just awful. But you don't, like in Skyrim, you don't really have that. And in the next gen, I'm sure it'll be even greater. You can see even further out, and so the size of these worlds can really just expand exponentially. And so, Shofsky, I know we were talking about this a little bit earlier. What do we think an open world Mass Effect game would actually look like if it were set, say, on the Citadel? So you don't leave the Citadel, but you can explore the entirety of the Citadel. Is that something that would be satisfying?
This I don't know, because again, going back to the Dragon Age 2, this was the big problem everyone had with Dragon Age 2. It was set in one area, just one area. Now, I don't think it'll be quite comparable, because in Dragon Age 2, every area looked exactly the same. Every corridor looked the same. Every room looked the same. I don't think it will be like that. But we also got back to this. This is a space game. You want the freedom to have your own spaceship to go where you want.
That kind of has been a BioWare staple.
That has been a BioWare staple.
Yeah,
Go where you go. But I love the idea of having a much larger area of the Citadel to explore, because for the most part we've just been,
it really feels cordoned off a lot of the time.
Yeah,
I think
even in one when you had this huge area of the Citadel to explore.
It's true, you really did, or at least the space you could walk might not have been as big, but the areas you were in felt
a lot bigger,
a lot larger.
Yeah,
I'm thinking of the Presidium being out, quote, outside, with the huge, expansive, arching things with the water.
Yeah.
In which there are no fish.
There are no fish. I really think it would be to their benefit to. Could they give us both? Could they give us a huge, expansive citadel?
And then
a space
also have space travel.
That inside. Yeah, that's the thing.
So,
the goal everyone would like to have.
Right. Can we have it all?
Can they figure out how to do that?
Can we do both?
Given their limitations?
They have repeatedly stated. Hate to keep bringing it back to Dragon Age, but in Dragon Age they did say there is one area of Dragon Age that is bigger than the entirety of Dragon Age 2, and that's just one city. And that's just a tiny little blip of the game that you can explore.
Let's compare it to something that we haven't actually really talked about on the podcast yet. Let's compare it to Assassin's Creed. So you have like Assassin's Creed 2, you have a bunch of different cities, and they're sizable cities.
Yeah.
They're not small things. But then in Brotherhood and Revelations, you are relegated to, for the most part, a single city. Granted, the cities are massive.
Really.
So you have Rome and Constantinople, respectively. But, all of the story elements aside, I thought, in terms of setting, that those games were more or less on par with 2. I didn't feel like I was hindered in that way. Or is maybe the comparison I'm trying to make here completely non-applicable?
I don't think it's entirely non-applicable.
Inapplicable? Unapplicable?
Inapplicable. I think it applies.
Not able to be applied.
But I think it does apply. But because you're right, I hadn't even thought of that. The Brotherhood is a good example of a game that succeeds. Although having said that, I still think I like 2 better than Brotherhood.
Well, we all agree that I think 2 is superior to every other Assassin's Creed.
2 is the best Assassin's Creed,
for myriad reasons.
Reminds me of 3, or how about 3? 3, which is with all of 3's settings, are less interesting.
Well, but I think that's more of a content issue than a number of settings.
When we're talking about settings, I think content is crucial.
Oh, sure. And this
if you're going to have one spot, what are you going to fill it with? Rome still had differentiated areas. You could still be out near the Colosseum, and you could have grassland and hills. You could have slums, and you could have...
This is why I think that setting it just in the Citadel would not work, and why I don't think the analogy actually applies. Even though I'm the one that made it, I'm allowed to do that. Because they've sort of set up the aesthetic of the Citadel, and it's a kind of unified aesthetic.
Yeah.
So everything kind of looks the same. And even if you say, well, we haven't seen all of it, we can change it up a bit, and they're more than welcome to take their creative liberties with that. But even if you do that, there's still just the key difference of Citadel being on a station versus flying through space in a spaceship. It's just, there is one and there is another, and it's just not the same thing. Now, maybe you could have something where you're just sort of free to, maybe they, really go in the direction of Grand Theft Auto, just totally brain vomit here, but, what if you hop into a shuttle and you can fly anywhere you want in Citadel yourself? Actually fly the Kodiak shuttle.
As opposed to walk.
As opposed to walk to that area, take the elevator there. Let's also talk about. I love the elevators in Mass Effect 1.
Sure. Why did you get rid of that?
I thought that was the most elegant way to load a new area that I've ever seen in a video game, and everyone else seems to hate the elevators. I thought they were so well done. Granted, they took a long time, but it's an elevator.
I think it doesn't take any longer than a loading screen itself does.
Right, precisely. And it's so much more elegant than having a loading screen and going, oh, I'm being ripped out of the element. you're always there as the character. You can sort of look around, the other your companions talk to each other, you hear news of, what you've done, what you did last. I think it was great, and I'm really, really sad they took it out. I hope they bring it back. They probably won't, though.
Only in a self-referential.
Right, only to joke and go, ha ha ha, wasn't that weird when we did that? But
yeah, but it wasn't weird.
It wasn't weird, it was so good.
It has not been matched since, I think, in just wonderful. Wonderfully elegant is the best word for it.
Yeah.
How epic the load times were in Mass Effect 2. How ridiculously long they were.
Right, and they felt even longer. Because
longer.
I wonder, if we timed it out, would load times for Mass Effect 1 in fact be longer than Mass Effect 2? I think they might be, or even comparable, but you don't feel it, because you're still playing, you're still there. You're as the character, you're still inhabiting that persona. Alright, so let's go to, let's talk about mistakes and successes of the original Mass Effect trilogy and what can carry over to the new game. So obviously there was, with the differences in every game, you've had dissenters, and you've had people who are all about it, one way or another, more RPG elements, more third-person shooter stuff. The gunplay is great, the gunplay sucks. And then, of course, the biggest one is the ending of Mass Effect 3. And, sort of everyone kind of losing their minds about that. What lessons are there to be learned from the original trilogy that might be applicable to a new game? Are there any? I mean, I imagine there has to be something.
Right.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are things that they've learned and applied into 3. Because I was kind of with them for so much of 3. I was right with them. Almost all of the things that happened in 3, I am 100% in favor of.
Oh, right.
3, for me, not 2. I'm surprised. I did not know Mike Shupsky is a non-believer here. 3 is the best of the 3, precisely because it does such a great job at bringing out the elements that we liked from the first.
Well, I would actually disagree with that statement, but we can get into that.
Oh, and throwing away the things that didn't work. The combat in 3 is at its height. It's the smoothest,
yes.
It's the best, it's the most fun. The incorporation of the biotics as an extension of the combat is the best. They're the easiest to use, they're the most effective, they're the most exciting, they're the most
The biotics really are fantastic in Mass Effect 3. All the guns are really punchy.
Yeah.
Everything in the combat, I will agree, is the best in Mass Effect 3.
I'm partial to 2 mostly because of the story and how much I love all
See, this is what I'm going to get at that too, because I was going to say 3's improvement over 2's lack of story. 2 didn't have a plot.
I loved 2.
2 was a collection.
I loved 2.
2 was a
guys
series
on a mission. Get your squad together and go on this mission. I loved it. I loved it.
The mission was the last hour of a 20, 30-hour game. That was what it was about.
Yeah.
So,
and
but the thing is that in 2, you're presented with this thing. It's like you have to go and collect all these people, and when you collect all the people, then they each have a personal mission that you have to do for them to get them on your side.
Which were the best missions of
Right, they were the best missions, but they were presented as an optional choice. It's like, you can do this, or you can go into the final battle without doing it. You can upgrade the ship, or you can go into the final battle without doing it. But it was like, it was too much of a clear connection between, you upgrade this part of the ship, this person dies.
Really contrived. They wanted to say, like, all of your choices and actions affect what happens at the end, but it was so obvious that it didn't feel earned at all. I just said, oh, good thing I did that. It was like they had a checklist.
Right,
they did it in a span of a minute and a half.
The final, when you enter the Omega Relay and your ship is in there and you're fighting against the collectors and, you use the big gun and it blows up the ship and then they shoot you and, oh, good thing we had that hull plating. It's like all of these things. It really does feel like check, check, check. Okay, I did all that. Great, wonderful. But it's like, if you don't do that, if you say, no, that's not worth my time, I want to go over here and explore and just kind of look at things and hang out, or do something that is, quote, more trivial, you are in a sense punished for that at the end of the game, and then your squad dies, and then you don't get those characters back, and it feels just shitty.
It feels too black and white, I think.
Right,
it doesn't.
right.
It never felt like the way that the game presents it as it's going on is, get some hull plating. You might want this because you're going into battle.
Yeah, right. Well,
you're probably right.
Probably
but then the way it's presented to you is just so obvious. It's like there wasn't ever really an option. There was never a choice. It was either you do this,
or people are going to fucking die.
This specific person lives, or you do this, and this specific person dies. Add some ambiguity to it. I mean, it shouldn't happen every time. It shouldn't be the same part of something every time. It should, maybe some people should be able to not do things and come out fine in the end out of pure dumb luck. And I don't feel like the game, and I haven't tried every possible option. Maybe the game lets you do that. I don't think.
No, it doesn't. No, there is a big sort of thing online, just a big image that shows you, like, if you do this and this and this and this, like, it shows you every possible combination of, like, in the final mission, how to use people exactly in the right way. If you do this, like, you can't use these people on this team. If you use them on this team, they'll survive until this point, then you have to switch them out and do it this way. And it shows you the exact combination of exactly what happens when you use these different people. And it just feels so, like, mechanical and unorganic.
It takes away the whole idea.
What's the alternative?
The alternative is to make it,
even just
to maybe randomize it, or just not give so much of a direct connection from, like, here's the action and here's the clear consequence of this singular action. It's like there are other things that could happen.
But that's exactly what happened in 1 and 3. That's exactly
in 1.
That's exactly what happened.
I would argue that 3 is very much the same way, and that's why I don't think 3 is the best.
One action has a consequence. Another action has this consequence.
Well, but it's a sort of...
You can map out all of the choices that you've made throughout the entire series and say, if you did all this stuff, you're going to get to this point. Well, red, green, blue explosion. We'll get to that later. But it's still, like, I still think it's very transparent throughout the entire series.
Well, maybe
but this is the thing that we're saying, is that I don't want it to be transparent. I don't want to know that this is the correct answer, because the thing that makes it feel real to me, the thing that makes me feel emotion, is that it feels like the real world. And when you tell me, well, if you do this, this is what's going to happen every single time, it kind of ruins the magic of it for me. I want to know that I want there to be that lingering fear in the back of my mind, even if I did everything correct, something could still go wrong and someone could die. Just knowing that was there, that brings the drama up so much more. And then you can, like, talk about it with people, and you can compare stories. It's that when you say, what did you do on Mass Effect last night, the story doesn't go, oh, well, you should have done this. It goes, what happened? Do you think
I checked off the checklist, everything's okay.
Yeah, the way Heavy Rain works, and it puts you in the moment for so many of those things, that, like, people can die at any point, and then the game just kind of moves on without them. But you are right there controlling it. It's not that if you didn't do this, you're screwed there. It's, how long... I'm losing my train of thought with this. I'm just trying to think of a good example of having that ambiguity.
See,
even just taking all the same options and put them on a probability slider or something.
Right.
I don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I just can't think of a game that does that has ambiguity. Like, this is what we want, sure.
Yeah. Well, there you go. We're not saying that there are necessary. Again, for all the bitching I do, I love Mass Effect. I love the series so much. I'm not saying that look at all these other games that are so far superior. It's just, I feel like there are sort of not super complex ways of adding a bit of randomness and reality to these scenarios that I think would carry it a lot further. Now, I think we should go back and talk about, because you said even in Mass Effect 1 that was true, and there are choices you make in 1 that affect 3, but I think that's kind of okay, because you've carried it over 3 games. It's not, do something here and 2 days later like this, but it doesn't even feel like a direct impact. It also, a lot of the time, it feels like, so I'm thinking about the Rachni. If you let the Rachni go,
they come back in 3 and help you build the Crucible, correct?
Well, they can. Like, you can go to them. So it's like...
But again, that's just...
But that's not... But that's
quantified as a war asset. That's like 200 war assets.
Well, right. And I mean, again, one of my complaints about Mass Effect 3 is that you have that kind of, like, it's just check. That's kind of annoying to me. But I think because it's not presented to you in the same way in Mass Effect 1. You don't see, like, the immediate impact of that. You know, whereas in Mass Effect 2, for me, it really feels like if your squad mates are loyal, then they will do X, Y, and Z for you. And, like, you are, like, pretty much given that information off the bat. It's like, you want them to be loyal because they get, like, they can unlock extra powers, you know, and, you know, it was pretty much understood that, you know, they have less of a chance of dying at the end, like, all of these other things. And so it's like, well, I mean, if I don't get them all loyal, if I don't do these missions, they're going to die. So it's like, that isn't a choice, that's an ultimatum. It's like, do these missions, or you're going to have a really bad ending to the game. It's not, you know, it doesn't feel good. I don't like that.
And I think, well, the thing that I just thought of adding on to it, that in the end, when you're making a game like this that is not actually real life, and when you come down to it, everything is going to be a yes or no. It all has to be zeros and ones. But you need, the problem that I see with 2 is that there just aren't enough levels. I mean, I'm sure they did so many hours of work just getting to that level of complexity,
Right.
But it needs to go another step.
Well, it's kind of the butterfly effect, you know. So it's like the butterfly flaps its wings, and that does something, and that does something, and that does something. It's like something so small can change absolutely everything about how all of this could have worked out. And so maybe it's, you know, maybe instead of do we have hull plating so when the big gun shoots us, we don't explode. Maybe it's just like, how do you treat?
Could there be three different times that it has
or just
different possible options?
Consider this. Before you go on the mission, you talk to, say, Tally. And you can console her and maybe tell her, stay up here on the bridge with me, I want to chat, you know, we'll go into this together, hug me, you know, let's do it on the, you know, the control panel, whatever. Or you can have, like, a neutral response, or you can have a negative response, in which she goes down to engineering and sulks, cries a little bit into her helmet. And if you choose the negative response, engineering gets hit, she dies. If you choose the neutral response, she's somewhere else. If you choose the positive response, she's on the bridge with you, and maybe, you know, she reacts with lightning speed and is able to save everybody from engineering. It's like things like that. It's like the subtle things that feel so much more subtle.
It lets it feel more organic to you. It doesn't make you feel like you drew a line from point A to point B.
Precisely.
I don't know. To me, that just sounds exactly like what they did. That kind of thing would sound like exactly the type. It just sounds like
it's similar. But I think it's a very fine. I think the difference is
it comes at it from a different perspective.
I mean, as far as how the game works, it's sort of the same system. But it's just, again, the presentation to the player is how organic.
Because, like I said, I mean, you can't actually use a different system. These are computers. They need to go if this, then this.
Yeah. So I think we'll wrap up the Mass Effect discussion there. It kind of went on forever. But
did it really?
I mean, not long enough.
I could talk about that.
We could talk about it forever, as is the case on most of the things we talk about here. So for the next topic, we're transitioning to the Nintendo 2DS, which was announced probably about a week ago now. Kind of looks like a wedge of cheese. What's up with the design? Mike Shipsky, what?
Take a stab at
what's going on? What's going on with the 2DS?
Well, I think they looked at the MacBook Air and said, "Hey, that looks neat, little teardrop look. Let's do that, but make it fatter.
Make it fatter. Make it look like it belongs in the hands of a 2-year-old with sticky fingers."
But this is actually the good point, though. I think it purposely has that chunky look to survive mashings and bashings of a 3-year-old playing a 2DS. And then I also think it's supposed to evoke the classic Game Boy look, the open-face classic Game Boy look. So that I can understand. I still don't like the design. I still don't like how it looks. But I can see what they're going for.
I think another thing to consider is that it probably is meant for younger children, or just children who have a 3DS but keep breaking the hinge.
Yeah.
I think that's that's a standard problem. The hinge is sort of the weak point in the system, and you have kids and they drop it or leave it around and the dog chews on it, things like that. And and so if you don't have a hinge, if you eliminate that, then that's not a problem anymore.
See, I'm okay with the open face thing, but they have a joystick now for it. I think the joystick being open face could. Does it have a joystick? Let me be. Yeah, joystick.
Yeah.
I think that has a potential to get.
And all the buttons are kind of centered, so it's.
I mean, thinking back to the original Game Boy, it just had the D-pad and 2 buttons, and even though it was open faced, those buttons aren't prone to breaking. I think a joystick being open faced like that.
Well, but it's kind of the laying flat joystick. I don't know.
I guess, but if you keep taking it out, putting it in your pocket, taking it out, it could put some significant wear and tear on that joystick.
It's probably true.
I mean, think back
the
to
screens are probably going to get scratched a lot more easily.
Oh yeah, I
mean,
mean,
they have no protection
because they have no protection, right?
Right. I mean, like the screen for the original Game Boy was just like a sturdy, just a crappy little screen. Like you didn't really care if it got scratched up.
Which can I just interject here and say I saw total blast from the past thing today on the internet, or not today, this week rather, where you would have those little lights you would plug into the side of the Game Boy, and it'd be like a little street lamp that would shine down on it. So it's like, no, why put a backlight in it? Shine a flashlight down on top of the Game Boy so you can play. So it's like, Jimmy, go to bed. No, fuck you, Mom. I have a flashlight on my Game Boy. The advances in technology are amazing.
Yeah.
Did it have a little curly?
Yeah, it had a little curly thing. A little curly thing with a lamp.
Yeah.
Looks like a street light.
I think mine was yellow, if I remember correctly.
Nice.
The color of the lamp. But anyway.
Yes. I was gonna say about the 2DS, I don't know if anyone's really excited about it outside of the target audience. The audience. This, it feels like a product that was not created out of a brilliant revolutionary thought or design.
No.
This is a product that they came to a meeting and said, what market are we missing? Parents who don't want to spend that much for 3DS. Fill it.
Right.
And they came back with this, and it's just kind of custom tailored to fit the exact person they wanted to fit. And because of that, it'll probably justify itself.
I think it'll sell very well. I think it will.
I'm not convinced of that. I'm not convinced it's going to sell well. I think that the sales figures on the 3DS. The 3DS is the top-selling console currently of them all. One 3DS to rule them all. I'm not sure about that because I think the novelty of the 3DS is ripped away with the 2DS. Is it, will the $40 difference in price, or the $30 difference in price, 30 or 40, I'm not sure.
I think it's...
Because it's $130, I think it's a $40 difference, I'm pretty sure it's 40. Because it's $130 and $170, I believe. But even that, a small difference in price, I don't think that's going to be a really big thing. I don't... To not have 3D, which I think gets into the issue of what happens to a developer's game that has been made for the 3DS. And so now you can play it on a system that doesn't have any 3D capability.
Are there any games for the 3DS that require the 3D? Because, when I played with 3DS, the 3D is kind of slapped on the top, I always thought. It's just kind of got things will pop out, like a little pop-up story, but the developers don't have much control over how the 3D functions. It's a sheen applied on top by the handheld, and so because of that, I think it'll be fine. This was probably really cheap to make. How much money did they have to spend to to make less moving parts and have a simpler screen.
Yeah.
And they can market it cheaper and to have every parent, because I mean, for every person who has bought one, how many of them thought it was too much? This Christmas comes around, the prices, I don't know when the prices drop on them, and then this is even cheaper than something that's already old, you know? This is an afterthought product. And so that's why I said it will justify itself. It's not going to take over the gaming world, but it will make Nintendo money based on how much they put into it.
$40. That's the difference.
$40. Okay, as we thought. Well, I suppose we kind of answered the question then.
Especially
Does it cheapen the experience? I mean, I suppose if you consider that many 3DS games do just kind of have, because it is the sort of optional slider. Do you want to play in 3D?
Yeah, because on a 3DS, you could just turn it off.
Yeah.
This is perfect, especially for people buying for children who don't know, literally know nothing. Let me have one of your game handhelds. They can't even use those words. I'm trying to think. I can't dumb myself down enough for the things that old people say. But just picture your grandmother, and she's going to buy you something for your birthday. She doesn't want to ruin the surprise, so she's not going to ask you about it.
Right.
4-year-old Jimmy.
The DS3.
So
I would like a DS3.
So grandma goes to GameStop and says, "Oh, what is this wedge of cheese? No, that's a handheld.
Oh, I can't eat this?
Oh.
And then so she, knowing not any difference, buys the cheapest one.
I'll take the 2Ds.
Like I said, this is not an elegant product. There is no spark of ingenuity.
How many Ds do you get?
How many Ds?
How many Ds is Grandma?
So one more D is $40. Oh, I'll take the 2Ds.
I'll just have the 2Ds.
The 2Ds is good for me.
Or perhaps they would start saying the 2DS after the Nintendo, the Nintendods. I want a Nintendods too.
A Nintendods too, yeah.
This is more interesting than the product itself.
We
need to start filming what old people call this when they go to buy it in Walmart. Because I mean, they wouldn't even go. They don't even know GameStop exists. They go to Walmart. Yeah. I want a Nintendo.
I suppose that's true.
14.
But I mean, they walk around the mall a lot and they see GameStop and they say, "Oh, little."
Do you have board games?
Do you have a board game? Can you play Sorry on the Nintendods?
Sorry and Scrabble.
I want to play Parcheesi with my little Jimmy. Can I do that on 2Ds?
So, what do we think Nintendo's next hardware move is? I mean, this is, again, completely speculation, but the 3DS now is a couple of years old. This is sort of a as you said, an afterthought product. The Wii U is approaching its 1-year anniversary.
Also seems like an afterthought product, but that's a
yes, but approaching its 1-year anniversary. It's getting a price cut in a few weeks. What is Nintendo's next hardware move? Because I mean, it's difficult to predict what Nintendo will do because they're kind of their own thing. They kind of do what they want.
And I think they've got buckets of cash, don't they?
They have a ton of cash on hand.
So
they can afford to keep doing weird things.
So, I don't think they'll try and replace the Wii U in the next couple of years.
I'm thinking more in the mobile.
But mobile does seem to make
gaming.
them more money.
It really does.
I think this is their lineup for the foreseeable future. Their handheld lineup and their console lineup.
Is there going to be any sort of crossover integration? Because we're seeing stuff with the Vita.
Cool.
If that comes to fruition, the Vita and the PS4.
Yeah, that's something for them to consider. I think the Wii U, it already has its little
handheld thing. Will a sort of future iteration of the 3DS maybe?
Yeah, I'm sure they've talked about. That could be their next big project because the 3DS has been out long enough that the next thing we hear from them probably will be a new handheld, not this kind of handheld, an actual successor.
Right, and
this
is what I'm.
This shows how little we actually know. They might actually have a function that lets you play the 3DS game on the TV through the Wii U. Is that a thing?
No.
Do we know? No, it's not a thing.
No.
Because do you remember how cool it was when you had an N64 and you could plug the little adapter into the bottom of the controller and plug a Game Boy game in and play it on your TV.
That is true.
I played Pokemon on my TV.
That is true. Nintendo was ahead of the game on that one.
That would be a great thing for kids. I think that would be really cool. And they could use their stylus and then the 3DS.
Yeah, that's really the thing with kids.
DS.
They don't. When you design things for kids don't give a shit. They like strange things,
right?
Simple things, easy things. They go wild for things like that.
Grandma spends money on it.
You could play your Pokemon game on the TV. Why would you? it's a handheld game. Like, for an adult mind, it doesn't make any
sense, right?
Why would I?
Right.
Then I'm just more constrained. But no, for a child,
That's great.
the simple
It's the
novelty
novelty
of it
Right.
makes it good,
Yeah.
even if it's pointless.
Even if it's pointless. So
Maybe Nintendo knows things we don't. Because
maybe they're
You know, I
geniuses.
think this is just part of their grand scheme
to take over the
to
world.
take over the world. Mario will be ruling all in 20 years. We shall see.
We shall
I
see.
think he already does. I'd say.
It's true. I think Mario games. I mean, the Nintendo exclusives really sort of.
This is the big thing that Nintendo has down pat is their software. Like, I think in maybe 20 years, I would say, why are they even bothering making?
Well,
software at this point?
that's kind of what everyone's been asking, but they continue.
They can.
Yes,
they
persist.
persist. And like you said,
why aren't they just a software company?
and like you said,
But
like
they're.
why didn't they go the
They
way of
keep on
Sega
going.
and just?
But I mean, I think on the Wii U isn't a great example, but the 3DS has been a good reason, a good example of why they're still a hardware company.
Yeah.
Because for people who
They still
want a different experience, they don't want to play games on their cell phones. They want something a little bit different. The 3DS offers that.
I also think their thinking is, people want their software so much, they will buy hardware. Just to play.
Just
Mario.
to have the next Mario.
Just
to have the next Zelda.
the way they think is, why would we bother, letting people play it on the Xbox and the PS4 when they will
when they buy our
gladly
hardware.
buy a Wii U
Right, yeah.
to play. I think that
Hardware sales make up the money they would get in licensing fees.
and I think that
Yeah.
that is still a big deterrent. I think it will keep them going for many, many years.
Cool. All right, so we're going to end for this week. We are going to continue recording, but you unfortunately have to stop listening. But you can go find something else to listen to. It'll be okay. So you can go to our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/alive2play. Our Twitter feed is @alive2play. Post comments, tweet at us, tell us what we're doing right, tell us what we're doing wrong. We've got a lot of really cool stuff in the works. We've got writers chugging away on great stuff, and we're really, really excited to get some of that out to you guys. So I am Mike Reifenberry, editor of Live to Play, or Josh Hartman and Mike Shipsky. We will talk to you guys next week.